Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights of the corporate office buzzed overhead, casting a harsh white glow across rows of identical gray cubicles. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen outside the glass-walled conference room, her fingers gripping the strap of her worn leather bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. Through the transparent barrier, she could see her father, Robert Mitchell, sitting with his shoulders hunched, his usually confident posture completely deflated. Across from him sat a man Sarah had only seen in business magazines and news articles. Daniel Cross, the youngest CEO in the tech industry, notorious for his ruthless efficiencies and complete lack of sentiment when it came to business decisions. His perfectly tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than her father's monthly salary. His dark hair was swept back with precision, and his sharp jawline could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's blood run cold. Steel blue, calculating, utterly devoid of warmth. She watched as Daniel slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. Her father's hands trembled as he opened it. Even from outside, Sarah could see her father's face crumble. Daniel's lips moved, his expression never changing, as cold and professional as a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. Sarah didn't need to hear the words. She knew. Her father was being fired. After 23 years of loyal service to quantum dynamics, through late nights and sacrificed weekends, through missed birthdays and family dinners, Robert Mitchell was being discarded like a broken piece of equipment. Sarah's father stood slowly, his movements those of a much older man. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply nodded once, gathered the folder, and walked toward the door. When he emerged, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry. He'd always been too proud to cry in public. "Sarah, Sarah, what are you doing here?" Her father's voice cracked slightly. His hand reached out to touch her shoulder, but it trembled. "I came to meet you for lunch, remember?" Sarah's throat constricted. She forced herself to speak normally, though rage was building in her chest like a pressure cooker about to explode. "Dad, what happened?" Her father glanced back at the conference room where Daniel was now standing, checking his phone with complete indifference. "Let's not talk here, sweetheart. Let's just go home." But Sarah's eyes had locked onto Daniel Cross. At that exact moment, he looked up. Their gazes collided through the glass. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps? Or maybe just mild curiosity at being stared at so intensely. Sarah didn't look away. She held his gaze, pouring every ounce of fury and contempt into that stare. Her message was clear. "I see you. I won't forget this." Daniel's eyebrow arched slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching in what might have been amusement. Then he turned away, dismissing her as easily as he had dismissed her father. That casual dismissal ignited something in Sarah's chest. Not just anger, but determination. Cold, focused, absolute determination. She would make him pay. She would make Daniel Cross regret the day he fired Robert Mitchell. But she would be smart about it. That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment, laptop open, the glow of the screen illuminating her face in the darkness. Her father had gone home to break the news to her mother, and Sarah had claimed she needed to handle some work. Instead, she was researching. Daniel Cross, 32 years old, MBA from Harvard, took over quantum dynamics 3 years ago and turned it from a struggling mid-level tech company into an industry giant. His methods were legendary. Cut staff by 40% in the first year. Restructured every department, demanded excellence, and showed zero tolerance for anything less. The business world called him a genius. Employees called him a tyrant. Sarah called him something else entirely, but she kept those words to herself. She scrolled through article after article, learning everything she could. His schedule, his habits, his preferences. Daniel Cross arrived at the office every morning at 6:30. He drank his coffee black, no sugar. He couldn't stand inefficiency or excuses. He valued results above loyalty, innovation above tradition. And according to every source Sarah could find, he was currently driving his executive assistants into early retirement. He'd gone through 4 in the past 6 months, alone. Each one had quit, unable to handle his impossible standards and relentless pace. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. There it was. Her way in. If Daniel Cross needed an executive assistant who could keep up with his demands, who wouldn't crack under pressure, who could match his intensity, then Sarah would become exactly that person. She would get close to him. She would become indispensable. And then, when he trusted her, when he relied on her, she would destroy him from the inside out. Just like he destroyed my father, Sarah whispered to the empty room. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she began crafting the perfect resume. She had a business degree from a good university, strong administrative experience, and glowing references. She would need to embellish slightly, make herself appear more experienced than she actually was. But Sarah had learned something important in her 26 years. Sometimes, you had to bend the rules to get justice. By 3 a.m, her application was complete. Sarah hesitated only a moment before hitting submit. The moment the confirmation email arrived in her inbox, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The game had begun. She had no idea if he would even look at her application among what must be hundreds of others. But Sarah Mitchell had something most candidates didn't. She had motivation that went beyond a paycheck. She had a score to settle. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah, this is Jennifer from Quantum Dynamics Human Resources. We received your application for the executive assistant position to Mr. Cross. Would you be available for an interview tomorrow at 9? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out perfectly steady, professionally neutral. Yes, absolutely. I'll be there. Excellent. Please bring references and be prepared for a practical assessment. Mr. Cross is very particular about his requirements. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity. When Sarah hung up, she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart race beneath her palm. Tomorrow she would walk into the lion's den. Tomorrow she would face the man who had destroyed her father's career and pride. And she would smile and pretend to be exactly what he needed. Sarah stood in front of her mirror the next morning, adjusting her blazer for the 5th time. The navy suit was professional, conservative, nothing flashy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup minimal but polished. She looked competent, efficient, forgettable. Perfect. You can do this, she told herself, meeting her own eyes in the reflection. For Dad, the Quantum Dynamics building rose 40 stories into the Seattle skyline, all glass and steel, reflecting the gray clouds overhead. Sarah's heels clicked against the marble floor of the lobby as she approached the reception desk. Sarah Mitchell for Daniel Cross at 9. The receptionist's professional smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes shifted. Pity, perhaps. Or maybe just weary recognition of another lamb being led to slaughter. 37th floor. Jennifer will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride felt endless. Sarah's stomach churned, nerves and anticipation mixing into something almost nauseating. When the doors opened, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an exhausted expression waited. You must be Sarah. I'm Jennifer. She extended her hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. Follow me. We'll start with the practical assessment before you meet Mr. Cross. The assessment was brutal. Sarah was given a complex calendar to organize with overlapping meetings, conflicting priorities, and deliberately impossible scheduling demands. She had 30 minutes. She finished in 22, creating a logical flow that maximized efficiency while ensuring adequate preparation time between meetings. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly as she reviewed Sarah's work. Impressive. Most candidates give up or create something completely unusable. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I don't give up easily. That's good. You'll need that quality if you work here. Jennifer's tone suggested she had doubts about Sarah's survival rate. Mr. Cross is ready to see you now. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral as Jennifer led her down a hallway lined with abstract art and more glass walls. Everything here was transparent, exposed, nowhere to hide. Jennifer knocked once on a massive oak door, the only solid door Sarah had seen so far, then pushed it open. Mr. Cross, Sarah Mitchell is here. The office was enormous, dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city and Elliott Bay beyond. A desk made of dark wood and chrome sat near the windows, and behind it stood Daniel Cross. He was taller than Sarah remembered, probably 6'2". The photographs hadn't captured the way he commanded space, the sheer presence he exuded. He turned from the window, and those cold blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Sarah's breath catch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Recognition flickered across his face, brief but unmistakable. He remembers me, Sarah realized, from that day in the hallway. But his expression remained neutral as he gestured to the chair across from his desk. Miss Mitchell, please, sit. His voice was deep, authoritative, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Sarah sat, crossing her ankles, folding her hands in her lap. Professional. Poised, hiding the fury that simmered beneath her calm exterior. Jennifer tells me you completed the assessment quickly and accurately. Daniel didn't sit. Instead, he remained standing, looking down at her. A power play, Sarah recognized, making her feel small, off balance. Yes, sir. I believe in efficiency. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. Your resume is impressive. Business degree, administrative experience at 3 different companies. Yet you're only 26. That suggests you don't stay anywhere very long. Sarah had prepared for this. I leave when I've learned everything a position can teach me. I'm not interested in stagnation. I'm interested in growth and challenge. And you think this position would provide that? His tone was skeptical. Working for me is not a growth opportunity, Miss Mitchell. It's a pressure cooker. My last 4 assistants quit because they couldn't handle the pace. What makes you think you're different? Sarah met his gaze directly, unflinching. Because I don't quit, Mr. Cross. When I commit to something, I see it through, no matter how difficult it becomes. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of interest, perhaps respect. He moved around his desk, leaning against it, arms crossed. His proximity made Sarah acutely aware of his height, his presence. Why do you want this job? The real reason. Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't tell him the truth, of course, but she needed to give him something authentic enough to be believable. I want to work for the best, she said carefully. You've transformed this company in 3 years. I want to learn from someone who operates at that level, even if it means enduring impossible standards. Daniel studied her face, his gaze penetrating, as if trying to read her thoughts. Most people think I'm a tyrant, a ruthless bastard who doesn't care about anything except profit margins. Sarah's fingers tightened in her lap, but her expression remained neutral. I think you're someone who understands that sentiment doesn't build successful companies. Results do. His eyebrow arched, genuine surprise crossing his features. That's a refreshingly honest answer. Most candidates try to pretend they don't know my reputation. I don't see the point in pretending, Sarah said. If I'm going to work for you, I need to be realistic about what that means. And you think you can handle it? I know I can. Silence stretched between them. Daniel's eyes never left hers, and Sarah refused to look away. This was a test, she understood. He was waiting to see if she would crack, if she would show weakness. Finally, Daniel pushed away from the desk and returned to his chair. He opened a folder, Sarah's application, and scanned it briefly. You'll start Monday, 6:30 sharp. I expect you here before me with my coffee ready and the day's priorities organized. If you're late, don't bother coming at all. If you make a mistake, you get one chance to fix it. If you waste my time, you're done. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Good. Jennifer will handle the paperwork. Dismissed. Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Cross. He glanced up, and for just a moment, something unreadable flickered in those cold eyes. Don't thank me yet, Miss Mitchell. You might regret this decision. Sarah walked out of his office, her legs slightly unsteady but her head held high. Jennifer was waiting, already pulling up employment contracts on her computer. You got the job, Jennifer said, shaking her head in apparent disbelief. I have to admit I'm surprised. Most people don't get past the first 5 minutes with him. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm not most people. As she signed the papers, initialing page after page of non-disclosure agreements and employment terms, Sarah felt a dark satisfaction settling in her chest. She was in. Phase 1 complete. Now the real work would begin. Sarah arrived at Quantum Dynamics at 6:15 on Monday morning, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and carefully controlled rage. The building was nearly empty at this hour, just security guards and a few dedicated employees scattered across the lower floors. The 37th floor was silent, almost eerie in its stillness. Sarah unlocked Daniel's office, using the key card Jennifer had provided, stepping into the space that would become her battlefield for the foreseeable future. She had 15 minutes before Daniel arrived, 15 minutes to prepare his coffee exactly how he liked it. Black, no sugar, to review his calendar and prioritize his meetings, and to steal a quick look at his personal files if the opportunity presented itself. The coffee machine in the small kitchenette adjacent to his office was top of the line, naturally. Sarah had practiced at home over the weekend, learning to brew the perfect cup. Strong, but not bitter. Hot, but not scalding. She poured it into the simple white mug that sat on his desk every morning, according to her research. His calendar was a nightmare of back-to-back meetings, conference calls, and strategic planning sessions. Sarah quickly reorganized it, shifting 2 less critical meetings to create a lunch window. Even tyrants needed to eat. She had just returned to the outer office where her own desk sat, a sleek, modern workspace with 3 monitors and more technology than she'd ever had access to before, when she heard the elevator chime. 6:28. 2 minutes early, Daniel Cross strode down the hallway, his presence somehow even more commanding in the early morning quiet. He wore another perfectly tailored suit, this one midnight blue, and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. His eyes found her immediately, and something like surprise crossed his face. You're here. His tone suggested he'd expected her to quit before even starting. Of course. Your coffee is on your desk, and I've reorganized today's calendar to give you a 30-minute break at 1. You had 3 meetings scheduled during lunch, which is neither efficient nor sustainable. Daniel stopped walking, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You changed my calendar on your first day. Sarah met his gaze evenly. You hired me to manage your time efficiently. That's what I'm doing. If you don't like my decisions, I'll change them back. A beat of tense silence passed. Then Daniel's lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. Leave it. Let's see if your confidence is justified. He walked into his office without another word, and Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Round one to me, Dad, she thought. The morning passed in a blur of phone calls, document preparation, and crisis management. Sarah quickly learned that working for Daniel Cross meant operating at a pace that would have left most people gasping for air. He rattled off instructions while simultaneously reviewing reports and fielding calls from international partners. He expected her to keep up, to anticipate his needs before he articulated them, to solve problems instantly. Most people would have crumbled. Sarah thrived. By 11, she had successfully rescheduled a conflicting video conference, prepared briefing documents for an unexpected board meeting, and somehow managed to order lunch from Daniel's preferred restaurant despite them being fully booked. "You got a reservation at Marcello's?" Daniel looked up from his computer, genuine surprise evident on his face. "They haven't had availability for weeks." I explained that it was for you, and suggested that disappointing Daniel Cross might not be in their best interest. Sarah's tone was perfectly professional, but her eyes held a glint of satisfaction. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're either very good at this, or very good at faking it. Time will tell which." "I don't fake anything, Mr. Cross. I deliver results. That's what you pay me for." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been respect. "Most of my previous assistants were terrified of me by hour 3. You don't seem afraid at all. Should I be?" Sarah tilted her head slightly, her tone light but her eyes challenging. Daniel's gaze held hers for a long moment. Then he turned back to his computer. "No. Fear makes people useless. I prefer competence." "Then that's what you'll get." As Sarah returned to her desk, she allowed herself a small smile. Getting close to Daniel Cross was easier than she'd anticipated. He respected strength, efficiency, someone who could match his intensity. She could play that role perfectly. What he didn't know was that every document she filed, every conversation she overheard, every password she glimpsed when he typed, she was cataloging it all, building a case, finding his weaknesses. Her father had called that evening, his voice heavy with concern. "Sarah, sweetheart, I heard through a former colleague that you're working at Quantum Dynamics now. Please tell me you're not working for him." "I needed a job, Dad. The rent doesn't pay itself." Sarah kept her voice light, casual. "But why there? Why him?" "Because it's a good opportunity. Good salary, excellent benefits, and the experience will look great on my resume." Her father sighed deeply. "I don't like this. That man is dangerous, Sarah. Not physically, but he destroys careers without a second thought. He has no conscience. I can handle him, Dad. I promise. Please, just trust me." After she hung up, Sarah sat in the darkness of her apartment, staring at the wall. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Destroys careers without a second thought. No conscience. Yes, she thought bitterly. I know exactly what kind of man Daniel Cross is. That's why I'm here. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Sarah arrived early, stayed late, and executed every task with flawless precision. She learned Daniel's patterns, his moods, the subtle tells that indicated when he was pleased or irritated. She learned that he hated inefficiency more than incompetence, that he valued honesty even when it was uncomfortable, and that despite his cold exterior, he had a strange code of honor. He never lied, even when lying would be easier. One morning, Sarah arrived to find Daniel already in his office, which was unusual. He typically came in after her. He was standing at the window, his posture rigid, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Morning," she said carefully, setting his coffee on the desk. "Everything all right?" He didn't turn around. "My father died 3 years ago today." The words were delivered in his usual flat tone, but Sarah heard something underneath. Pain, maybe. Or the ghost of it. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and was surprised to find she meant it. We weren't close. Daniel's laugh was harsh, bitter. He thought I was too ruthless, too willing to sacrifice people for profit. We didn't speak for the last 2 years of his life. Sarah's chest tightened unexpectedly. She had come here to hate this man, to destroy him. But in this moment, standing in the early morning light with his guard momentarily down, he seemed almost human. Almost. Then she remembered her father's devastated face, his trembling hands, and her resolve hardened. He wants sympathy, she thought coldly. But he showed none to Dad. "I have your 9 o'clock briefing materials ready whenever you need them," Sarah said, her voice returning to its professional neutrality. Daniel turned from the window, his mask sliding back into place. "Good. Let's get to work." And just like that, the moment of vulnerability was gone. 3 months into working for Daniel Cross, Sarah had become indispensable. She knew his schedule better than he did, anticipated problems before they arose, and had somehow earned the grudging respect of every department head in the company. She was also secretly copying files. Not obviously, nothing that would trigger IT alerts. But every evening, after Daniel left, usually around 8 or 9, Sarah would spend an extra 30 minutes accessing files she technically had permission to view. Budget reports, staffing decisions, acquisition strategies. She was looking for something, anything, that would prove Daniel had fired her father unjustly. Some evidence of discrimination, or a pattern of targeting older employees, or financial manipulation that made her father a convenient scapegoat. But the more she dug, the more frustrated she became, because everything she found was clean, ruthlessly efficient, yes, cold and calculating, absolutely, but legal, ethical even, in its own harsh way. Her father had been fired as part of a department-wide restructuring. 20 people had lost their jobs that day, not just Robert Mitchell. And according to the documentation, her father's performance reviews had been declining for 2 years. Projects behind schedule, budgets overrun, teams underperforming. Sarah stared at the reports on her screen, her hands trembling slightly. This couldn't be right. Her father was dedicated, hard-working. He had given everything to this company. But the evidence didn't lie, and Sarah knew enough about corporate documentation to recognize that these reports hadn't been fabricated or manipulated. They were genuine, which meant Daniel's decision to fire her father had been justified. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had spent 3 months infiltrating this company, getting close to Daniel Cross, planning revenge for something that was actually a legitimate business decision. Sarah closed the files and sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. What am I doing? The question whispered through her thoughts, unwelcome and uncomfortable. Working late again. "Miss Mitchell?" Sarah's head snapped up. Daniel stood in the doorway of his office, his jacket off, his tie loosened. He looked tired, she realized. The carefully maintained mask of perfection showed cracks at this hour. "I was just finishing some filing." Sarah quickly closed all the windows on her computer, her heart hammering. "You should go home. It's nearly 10. His voice was softer than usual, lacking its typical edge. "So should you," Sarah found herself saying. "When was the last time you left before 9? Daniel's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Pointing out my poor work-life balance. That's brave. I'm pointing out that exhaustion leads to mistakes. And you don't make mistakes, so clearly you're not sleeping enough." He walked toward her desk, and Sarah was suddenly very aware that they were alone on this floor. The cleaning staff had finished hours ago. It was just the two of them in the dim office, the city lights twinkling through the windows. "You're very direct," Daniel observed, leaning against her desk. "Most people are afraid to tell me things I don't want to hear." Sarah met his gaze. You don't pay me to tell you what you want to hear. You pay me to tell you what you need to hear. Something in his expression softened, just slightly. In 3 months, you've become the best assistant I've ever had. You know that? Sarah's stomach twisted unexpectedly. She should feel triumphant. She had successfully embedded herself in his professional life, earned his trust. So why did his words make her feel guilty? I'm just doing my job. No, Daniel shook his head slowly. You're exceeding every expectation. You're anticipating needs I haven't articulated. You're solving problems before they reach my desk. You're making my life significantly easier, which I didn't think was possible. Sarah swallowed hard. Thank you. I appreciate that. He studied her face for a long moment, and Sarah had the uncomfortable sensation that he was seeing more than she wanted to reveal. Why did you really take this job, Sarah? The use of her first name startled her. He always called her Miss Mitchell. Because I needed a position with growth potential, she said, the lie coming automatically now. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. When I first saw you, standing in the hallway the day I fired your father, you looked at me like you wanted me dead. Sarah's blood ran cold. You knew? Of course I knew. Daniel's voice was quiet, matter of fact. I make it my business to know everything about the people who work for me. I knew you were Robert Mitchell's daughter before you even submitted your application. The world tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of her desk, trying to process this information. If you knew, why did you hire me? Because you were qualified. Because you were clearly determined enough to lie on your resume and fabricate references to get close to me. That kind of determination is rare. I wanted to see what you would do with it. Sarah felt anger flare in her chest, hot and sharp. So, this has all been a game to you? Watching me? Waiting to see when I would try to sabotage you? Not a game. Daniel's expression was serious now, almost regretful. An observation. I wanted to understand what drives someone to such lengths. And I've spent 3 months watching you struggle with something. He paused, his gaze intense. You came here for revenge, didn't you? Sarah stood abruptly, her chair rolling back. I came here because I needed a job. Daniel stood too, and suddenly they were close, too close. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You came here because you thought I destroyed your father unjustly. You came here to find evidence that would destroy me in return. Sarah's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. And what did you find? Daniel asked softly. Sarah's eyes burned with unexpected tears. She blinked them back furiously. I found that my father's performance had been declining, that he was failing to meet expectations, that his termination was justified. Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel's expression shifted to something that looked almost like sympathy. Your father is a good man, Sarah, but he wasn't a good fit for this company anymore. The industry changed. He didn't change with it. I gave him opportunities to improve. He couldn't or wouldn't. I had to make a choice. So you fired him. After 23 years of loyalty, after 2 decades of service, you just discarded him. Yes. Daniel didn't flinch from the accusation, because keeping him would have meant dragging down his entire team. Would have meant compromising projects, missing deadlines, losing clients. I had to choose between one man's feelings and the livelihoods of 500 other employees. Sarah pressed her hands against her face, overwhelmed. I hate that I understand your logic. I hate that the numbers make sense. I hate that I can't find a reason to justify my anger anymore. When she looked up, Daniel was watching her with an expression she had never seen before. Not cold calculation, but genuine concern. Your father wasn't a bad employee, Sarah. He was just in the wrong role at the wrong time. That doesn't make losing his job hurt any less, but it also doesn't make me a villain. Just a CEO making difficult choices. Sarah didn't go home that night. Instead, she sat in the empty conference room on the 37th floor, staring out at the glittering Seattle skyline, trying to process everything. Daniel had known. From the beginning, he had known exactly who she was and why she was there. He had hired her anyway, given her access to everything, and waited to see what she would do. And she had done nothing. Because there was nothing to find. Her father had been fired fairly, if harshly. Sarah heard footsteps and turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He walked over and set one in front of her. Peace offering. Or just caffeine. Either way, you look like you need it. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold on to. Why didn't you fire me when you figured out my real motives? Because your motives didn't change the fact that you're exceptionally good at your job. Daniel sat down across from her, his own coffee steaming between his palms. And because I understood why you did it. If someone fired my father, I would probably want revenge too. But you let me waste 3 months. Not waste. Daniel's voice was firm. You learned this industry inside and out. You developed skills that will serve you for the rest of your career. And you learned that revenge built on false premises is hollow. Sarah laughed bitterly. That sounds almost noble when you say it that way. It wasn't noble. Daniel met her eyes. It was selfish. I needed a competent assistant, and you're the best I've ever had. I wasn't about to lose you over something as trivial as your initial motivation for taking the job. Trivial? Sarah's voice rose slightly. I came here to destroy you. And instead, you became invaluable to me. His words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to examine. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, Sarah admitted quietly. My entire plan for the last 3 months has been built on a lie I told myself. That you were a villain who needed to be taken down. That my father was an innocent victim. But the truth is more complicated than that. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her. Most people prefer simple narratives. Good guys and bad guys. It's more comfortable than accepting that sometimes there are just difficult choices with no good options. So what happens now? Sarah asked. Do I quit? Do we pretend this conversation never happened? What do you want to happen? The question caught Sarah off guard. She thought for a long moment, really examining her own feelings for the first time in months. I want to keep working here, she said slowly. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything to my father, or to you. But because I'm actually good at this. Because I like the challenge. Because working for you, despite your impossible standards and terrible hours, has made me better at everything I do. Daniel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then stay. Sarah met his gaze. You're really okay with employing someone who came here to sabotage you? You haven't sabotaged anything except your own assumptions. And I respect someone who can admit when they were wrong. That takes integrity. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the knot of anger and pain she had carried for 3 months. Her hatred for Daniel Cross hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more complex. Respect, maybe, or at least understanding. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself seeing Daniel differently. Without the lens of revenge coloring her perception, she noticed things she had missed before. The way he stayed late to review reports, personally rather than delegating to ensure quality. The way he fought for his employees in board meetings, arguing for better benefits and fair compensation, even when it hurt quarterly profits. The way he remembered small details about people's lives, asking about sick family members or congratulating someone on a child's graduation. He was still demanding, still ruthless when necessary, but he was also fair in a way Sarah hadn't expected. He held everyone to the same impossible standards, including himself. One afternoon, Sarah was organizing files when she came across something that made her pause. A letter, dated 3 years ago, from her father to Daniel. She shouldn't read it. She knew that. But her fingers opened the document anyway. Mr. Cross, I'm writing to formally request consideration for early retirement. I've given this company 20 years, but I know my skills are no longer aligned with where quantum dynamics is heading. I'm struggling to keep pace with new technologies and methodologies. Rather than hold my team back, I believe it would be best for everyone if I could exit with dignity and a reasonable severance package. Respectfully, Robert Mitchell. Sarah's hands trembled. Her father had asked to leave. He had known he was struggling. Daniel's response was in the next document. Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate your honesty and self-awareness. However, I believe with proper training and support, you could adapt to these new systems. I'm not ready to lose your institutional knowledge and leadership experience. Please meet with me to discuss a development plan before we consider retirement options. Regards, Daniel Cross. There were more emails. Daniel offering training programs. Her father declining, saying he was too old to learn new tricks. Daniel pushing back, trying different approaches. This went on for 6 months, until finally, Daniel had written a last email. Robert, I've tried every option I can think of to help you succeed in this evolving environment. You've rejected training, refused mentorship from younger team members, and declined transfer to a different department where your skills would be better suited. I can't carry underperforming team members indefinitely, no matter how much I respect their past contributions. I'm giving you 3 months' notice that your position will be terminated. This should provide time to find something better, suited to your strengths. I'm sorry it came to this. DC. Sarah sat back, the weight of realization crushing her chest. Daniel hadn't been cruel. He had been patient, more patient than most CEOs would have been. He had tried to save her father's job. Her father had been too proud to accept help. Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks. Not tears of anger this time, but of grief and regret. She had wasted 3 months hating someone who didn't deserve it. She had blamed Daniel for her father's pride. That evening, she knocked on Daniel's office door, the printed emails in her hand. Come in. He looked up from his computer, and his expression shifted when he saw her face. Sarah? What's wrong? I found these. She set the emails on his desk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. I spent months planning revenge against someone who actually tried to help my father. Daniel stood and came around the desk. Sarah, you don't need to apologize. You were loyal to your father. That's admirable. It was misguided loyalty based on incomplete information. Sarah wiped her eyes angrily. I've been horrible. You knew, and you never said anything. You let me figure it out myself. Because telling you wouldn't have changed how you felt. Daniel's voice was gentle. You needed to discover the truth on your own terms, or you never would have believed it. Sarah looked up at him, this man she had spent so long hating, and felt something entirely unexpected. Gratitude. Thank you for being patient with me, for not firing me when you had every reason to. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Sarah's breath caught. You're welcome. And for what it's worth, your father spoke about you often. He was incredibly proud of you. Even after everything. Even after he knew I was the one who terminated his employment. He would mention how brilliant and determined you were. He wanted better for you than what he had. That's why he never told you the whole story. He was ashamed. Sarah's throat tightened. Did he really say that? He did. Daniel's hand dropped back to his side, but he remained close. The last conversation I had with your father, he asked me to never tell you about his struggles here. He wanted you to remember him as the dedicated employee who gave everything to his career, not as someone who couldn't keep up with change. I wish he had told me the truth, Sarah whispered. I wish he had let me help him through it instead of carrying that shame alone. Pride makes us do foolish things. Daniel's voice held a note of personal understanding. Believe me, I know. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling between them. Sarah became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from Daniel's presence, of the way his eyes had softened as he looked at her. I should go, Sarah said quietly, though she didn't move. It's late. Stay. Daniel's word was soft, but certain. Please. Let's order dinner. We can work on the Henderson acquisition proposal together, unless you'd rather be alone. Sarah considered. A week ago, she would have refused. But now, standing in his office with the city lights glowing behind him and the truth finally clear between them, she found she didn't want to be alone. Dinner sounds good. What do you want to order? Daniel smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually stern features. Something tells me you already know my preferences better than I do. The weeks following Sarah's discovery brought an unexpected shift in their dynamic. The professional boundaries remained, but something underneath had changed. Sarah no longer felt like she was playing a role or hiding her true self. And Daniel, perhaps sensing this authenticity, began to reveal glimpses of the person beneath the CEO facade. One morning, Sarah arrived to find a package on her desk. Inside was a book, a first edition of her favorite novel, something she had mentioned only once in passing months ago. Daniel appeared in the doorway of his office, coffee cup in hand. I remembered you said your copy fell apart from rereading it too many times. Sarah ran her fingers over the embossed cover, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This must have cost a fortune. Consider it a bonus for 3 months of exceptional work. His tone was casual, but his eyes held something warmer. Thank you. Sarah looked up, genuinely touched. You didn't have to do this. I know. But I wanted to. Daniel paused, then added, You've made my life considerably easier, Sarah. That's worth acknowledging. The use of her first name, which had become more frequent lately, sent a flutter through her stomach that she tried to ignore. This was her boss, her father's former boss. Getting emotionally involved would be catastrophically stupid. But her heart didn't seem to care about logic. Their working relationship evolved into something resembling partnership. Daniel began asking for her opinion on strategic decisions, valuing her perspective in ways that went beyond typical assistant duties. Sarah found herself staying late, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The work was challenging, intellectually stimulating, and being around Daniel felt natural in a way she hadn't expected. One evening, as they reviewed quarterly reports together, Daniel suddenly closed his laptop and looked at her. Can I ask you something personal? Sarah's pulse quickened. Of course. Do you still hate me? His directness was characteristically Daniel, but the vulnerability underneath was new. Sarah set down her pen, considering the question carefully. No. I don't think I ever really hated you. I hated what I thought you represented. The cold corporate machine that destroys people without caring. But you're not that. What am I then? Daniel's gaze was intense, searching. Sarah met his eyes. You're someone who makes impossible choices because someone has to. You're demanding because you know what excellence looks like, and you refuse to settle for less. You're ruthless when necessary, but fair. Always fair. And underneath all that cold efficiency You actually care. You just don't let people see it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "That's the most accurate assessment anyone's ever made of me." "I've had 3 months to study you pretty carefully," Sarah said with a slight smile. "For revenge purposes initially." His lips twitched. "Initially," Sarah admitted. "Now it's just force of habit. I notice things about you." She stopped, realizing how that sounded. "What kinds of things?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on her. Sarah's cheeks warmed. "Things like how you tap your pen twice before making a difficult decision. How you loosen your tie when you're stressed, but won't admit it. How you get this tiny crease between your eyebrows when you're reading something that concerns you. How you take your coffee black because your father drank it that way, and it reminds you of him, even though you actually prefer it with cream." Daniel stared at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You notice all that?" "I notice everything about you," Sarah said softly, then immediately wished she could take the words back. They revealed too much. The air between them seemed to thicken with tension. Daniel stood slowly, walking around the desk until he was directly in front of her. Sarah remained seated, looking up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sarah," he said quietly, "this thing between us, whatever it is, it's complicated." "I know." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You work for me. That creates a power dynamic that could be problematic. I know that too. And 3 months ago, you were here to destroy me." Sarah stood, bringing them close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. 3 months ago, I didn't know you. Now I do." Daniel's hand lifted slowly, cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. "And what do you think now that you know me?" I think Sarah's breath caught. "I think you're brilliant and frustrating and impossible. I think you push me to be better than I thought I could be. I think working for you has been the most challenging and rewarding experience of my life. And I think I'm in serious trouble because I'm developing feelings for my boss, which is completely unprofessional and probably incredibly stupid." "Probably," Daniel agreed, but he was leaning closer. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "For what it's worth, I've been developing feelings for my assistant, which is equally unprofessional and possibly more stupid, given that she originally wanted to ruin me." Sarah's lips curved despite herself. "We're a disaster waiting to happen." "Absolutely." His mouth was inches from hers now. "Should we stop?" "Probably," Sarah breathed, but she didn't move away. Daniel closed the final distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, almost tentative. Then Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything," he murmured. "I know," Sarah said. "What do we do?" Daniel pulled back slightly, his expression serious. "We be honest, with each other and with HR. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. No secrets, no hiding. And if at any point the professional relationship becomes compromised, we address it immediately." Sarah nodded. "Agreed. Though I have to say, this is possibly the most business-like discussion of starting a relationship I've ever had." "Did you expect poetry?" Daniel's lips quirked. "From you?" "Absolutely not." Sarah smiled. "But maybe occasionally you could be slightly less CEO and slightly more human boyfriend." "Boyfriend." Daniel tested the word. "I haven't been anyone's boyfriend in years." "Well, you're mine now." Sarah's boldness surprised even herself. "Assuming you want to be." Daniel pulled her close again, his arms wrapping around her waist. "More than I probably should. But yes, I want to be." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet office, while the city lights glowed beyond the windows. Sarah felt the last remnants of her anger and resentment dissolve, replaced by something infinitely more complex and terrifying. She was falling in love with Daniel Cross. The man she had come here to destroy had somehow become the person she most wanted to protect. "My father," Sarah said softly against Daniel's chest. "I need to talk to him, to really talk to him about what happened." Daniel's hand stroked her hair gently. "Do you want me to come with you?" Sarah pulled back to look at him. "You would do that, if it would help, though I suspect your father might want to punch me in the face, which I would probably deserve." "He won't punch you." Sarah smiled slightly. "He's too polite, but he might want to yell." "I can handle yelling." Daniel's expression was serious. "I owe him an apology anyway, for not handling his termination with more care. I could have done better by him, even if the outcome had to be the same." Sarah felt her heart swell. This was why she was falling for him. Beneath the ruthless exterior, Daniel Cross had a conscience and a sense of responsibility that most people never saw. "Let me talk to him first," she said. "Alone. Then maybe we can all have dinner together." Eventually. Eventually, Daniel agreed, when everyone's ready. Sarah stood on her parents' doorstep the following Sunday, her stomach churning with nerves. She hadn't told them she was coming, afraid that if she called ahead, her father might refuse to see her. The door opened, and her mother's face lit up with surprised delight. "Sarah! Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Her mother, Patricia, pulled her into a warm embrace that made Sarah's throat tight. "I need to talk to Dad. Is he home?" Patricia's expression shifted to concern. "He's in his study." "Sarah, is everything all right?" "It will be," Sarah said, hoping it was true. "I just need to clear some things up." Her father's study was a small room lined with books and framed certificates from his years at quantum dynamics. Robert Mitchell sat in, his leather chair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed what looked like job postings on his laptop. He looked up when Sarah knocked on the open door, and his face went through a complex series of emotions. Joy at seeing her, then worry, then something like guilt. "Sarah." He stood quickly, closing the laptop. "This is a surprise." "Hi, Dad." Sarah stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk about Daniel Cross and quantum dynamics, about what really happened." Her father's face paled. "I don't want to discuss that man or that company. I know you don't. But we have to." Sarah sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair she had sat in as a child when her father helped her with homework. "Because I've been working as his executive assistant for the past 3 months. Robert Mitchell stared at his daughter, shock and horror warring on his features. "You what?" "Sarah, please tell me you're joking." "I'm not joking. I took the job because I was angry about what happened to you. I wanted to find evidence that he had fired you unjustly. I wanted revenge." Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. Her father sank back into his chair, suddenly looking much older. "Oh, Sarah, what have you done?" "I found the truth, Dad." Sarah leaned forward. "I found your emails requesting early retirement. I found the training programs Daniel offered that you refused. I found evidence that he tried to help you adapt, and you were too proud to accept it." Robert's face crumbled. He looked away, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. "You weren't supposed to see those." "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Why did you let me think he was a villain when you were the one who asked to leave?" "Because I was ashamed." Her father's voice rose, thick with emotion. "I spent 23 years at that company, Sarah. 23 years building a career, providing for my family, being someone you could be proud of. And then suddenly, I couldn't keep up anymore. Technology changed, methodologies changed, and I became obsolete. Do you have any idea how that feels? To realize you're no longer useful?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "You're not obsolete, Dad. You're experienced. You're knowledgeable. You just needed support to adapt." "I tried." Her father's voice broke. "God knows I tried. But every new system felt like another language I couldn't learn. Every meeting with younger colleagues felt like proof that I'd been left behind. And Daniel Cross, he just kept pushing, offering training, offering mentorship, like I was some charity case that needed fixing. He wasn't treating you like charity." Sarah reached across the desk, taking her father's hand. He was trying to keep someone with institutional knowledge and leadership experience. "He saw your value, Dad. You're the one who couldn't see it anymore." Robert Mitchell wiped his eyes roughly. "When he finally fired me, it was almost a relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore that I could keep up. I could just admit defeat and move on." "It wasn't defeat," Sarah said firmly. "It was a mismatch between your skills and the role you were in. That's not the same thing as being worthless." Her father looked at her, really looked at her, and seemed to see something new in his daughter's face. "You've changed. In just 3 months, you've changed. Working for Daniel has taught me a lot. About business, about making hard choices, about the difference between being ruthless and being cruel." Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's not the monster I thought he was. He's just someone in an impossible position, trying to balance the needs of 500 employees against the limitations of any individual person." "You sound like you're defending him." Robert's tone held a note of betrayal. "I am defending him, because he deserves it." Sarah squeezed her father's hand. "But I'm also defending you. You deserved better communication, more support, a transition that preserved your dignity. The situation wasn't handled perfectly on either side, but it also wasn't malicious." Her father was quiet for a long time, staring at their joined hands. "I've spent 3 months being angry, bitter, feeling sorry for myself. Your mother has been patient, but I know it's been hard on her too." "So do something about it," Sarah said. "Stop defining yourself by what you lost and start thinking about what you could do next. You have experience, connections, knowledge. Use them." "Doing what?" Her father's voice held a hint of the despair he'd been carrying. "I'm 57 years old, Sarah. No tech company wants to hire someone my age. Then don't work for a tech company. Consult. Teach. Mentor younger professionals who could benefit from your experience. Start your own business, helping traditional companies navigate digital transformation. Dad, you're not finished. You're just in a transition." Robert Mitchell looked at his daughter with something like wonder. "When did you become so wise?" "When I stopped being blinded by rage and started paying attention." Sarah smiled through her tears. "I learned that from Daniel, actually. He's incredibly good at seeing past emotions to analyze situations objectively. You really respect him." "It wasn't a question." "I do." Sarah took a deep breath. "And I'm dating him." The silence that followed was deafening. Her father's face went through shock, disbelief, and anger before settling into something more complicated. "You're dating the man who fired me." His voice was flat, carefully controlled. "I'm dating someone who tried to help you and made a difficult business decision when you refused that help. Someone who has treated me with respect and challenged me to grow. Someone I've come to care about deeply." Sarah's voice was firm. "I know this is hard to hear, Dad. But my relationship with Daniel isn't about what happened between you two. It's about who we are to each other now. How can you even look at him without thinking about what he did?" Robert's pain was evident. "Because what he did was his job," Sarah said gently. "A hard part of his job, but necessary. You know that, Dad. In your heart, You know that keeping you in that role wouldn't have been good for anyone, including you." Her father stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is a lot to process, Sarah. I know. Take your time. But please, Dad, don't ask me to choose between you and Daniel. I love you both, just in different ways." Robert turned back to his daughter, his expression complex. "I won't ask you to choose, but I can't promise I'll ever be comfortable with this." "That's fair," Sarah said. "I'm just asking you to try. Maybe someday you could even talk to him. Really talk. Not as CEO and former employee, but as two people trying to move forward. Maybe." Her father's voice was non-committal. Someday. It was a start. Not perfect, but a start. The revelation to her father marked a turning point. Sarah felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. Her relationship with Daniel deepened, transitioning from those intense early days into something more substantial and real. They were careful at work. Professional boundaries remained firmly in place during office hours. But after everyone else left, when it was just the two of them and the city lights, they would let their guards down. They would talk about everything and nothing, sharing parts of themselves they kept hidden from the rest of the world. One evening, Daniel showed Sarah a photograph he kept locked in his desk drawer. A woman with kind eyes, and Daniel's smile stood next to a young boy, maybe 8 years old, who looked serious even then. "My mother," Daniel said quietly. "This was taken about a year before she died." Sarah studied the photo, seeing traces of warmth in young Daniel's face that had been carefully locked away in the adult version. "You look like her. Everyone says I got my father's business sense and my mother's heart." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Though most people would argue I don't have a heart at all." Sarah turned to him, cupping his face in her hands. "You have a heart. You just guard it carefully. But I've seen it, Daniel. I've seen how you fight for your employees, how you remember details about their lives, how you agonize over difficult decisions, even when you know they're necessary. You see me differently than most people do." His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. "Because you let me see the real you." Sarah kissed him softly. "That's a gift not everyone gets." Their relationship couldn't stay secret forever. 3 months after they officially started dating, 6 months after Sarah had first walked into quantum dynamics, rumors began to circulate. The CEO's assistant, who was always there early and stayed late. The way Daniel's demeanor had softened slightly. The occasional smile that employees swore they'd never seen before. Jennifer from HR called Sarah into her office one morning. Her expression was professional but not unkind. "Sarah, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you and Mr. Cross involved in a personal relationship?" Sarah had known this moment would come. She and Daniel had discussed how to handle it. Honesty, they had agreed. Complete transparency. "Yes. We've been dating for 3 months. Sarah met Jennifer's gaze steadily. "We've maintained complete professionalism during work hours, and our personal relationship has not interfered with my job performance or his decision-making." Jennifer sighed, making notes on her computer. "I appreciate your honesty. You understand this puts us in a complicated position. There are power dynamic concerns, potential conflicts of interest. We understand that." Sarah pulled out a folder she had prepared. "That's why I've already drafted a request for internal transfer. I'm willing to move to a different department with a different supervisor to eliminate any ethical concerns." Jennifer's eyebrows rose. "You'd give up your position as executive assistant to the CEO? If that's what it takes to handle this situation appropriately, yes." Sarah's voice was firm. "Daniel and I both want to do this right. We're not hiding, and we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for the same consideration any other employees in a relationship would receive." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah with new respect. Most people in your position would try to leverage the relationship for advancement or special privileges. I'm not most people, and Daniel would never respect me if I did that. Sarah paused. For what it's worth, I'm better at my job now than I was when I started. My relationship with him has pushed me to higher standards, not lower ones. I can see that. Everyone has noticed the improvement in efficiency on the executive floor. Jennifer pulled up more files. Let me review our options for transfer. It might take a few weeks to arrange something appropriate for your skill level. I understand. Thank you for handling this professionally. As Sarah left HR, her phone buzzed. Daniel, how did it go? As expected. She's working on a transfer for me, Sarah typed back. Might take a few weeks. His response came quickly. I'm going to miss having you right outside my office. Sarah smiled at her phone. You'll survive. Besides, you'll see me every evening anyway. Not the same, but the right thing to do. That evening, they broke the news to the senior leadership team. The reaction was mixed. Some people were surprised. Others had suspected. A few raised concerns about favoritism, but Daniel addressed each issue directly and honestly. He had already implemented additional oversight for any decisions that might involve Sarah's department, and he would recuse himself from any performance reviews or promotions related to her position. Through it all, Sarah watched him navigate the complicated situation with the same strategic thinking he applied to business challenges. He was protecting both of them, protecting the company, and maintaining his integrity. It was one of the things she loved about him, his unwavering commitment to doing things the right way, even when it was harder. Love. The word had started appearing in her thoughts more frequently. She hadn't said it out loud yet. Neither had he. But it hung between them, unspoken but present. 2 weeks later, Sarah's transfer was finalized. She would be moving to the strategic planning department as a senior analyst, a promotion that had nothing to do with her relationship with Daniel and everything to do with the skills she had demonstrated over the past 6 months. On her last day as his assistant, Daniel called her into his office after everyone else had left. I got you something. He handed her a small box. Inside was a pen, elegant and simple, with her name engraved on the barrel. Sarah Mitchell, Strategic Planning. So you'll remember where you started, Daniel said quietly, and how far you've come. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shining. I could never forget. You changed my life, Daniel. I came here for all the wrong reasons and found something I never expected. What's that? Purpose, direction, and you. Sarah set the box down and moved into his arms. Definitely you. Daniel held her close, his chin resting on top of her head. You changed my life too. I didn't realize how isolated I'd become, how much I'd walled myself off from actually feeling anything. Then you walked in with your righteous anger and your determination to destroy me, and somehow you ended up saving me instead. I think we saved each other. Sarah tilted her face up to his. We're quite the pair, aren't we? The revengeful daughter and the ruthless CEO. Sounds like the start of a terrible romance novel, Daniel said with a slight smile, or the start of something real. Sarah kissed him softly. Something lasting. I'd like that, Daniel murmured against her lips. Something lasting with you. They stood together in his office, the same space where Sarah had once imagined confronting him with evidence of his crimes, where she had plotted his downfall. Now it was simply the place where she had learned to see past her assumptions, to understand complexity and nuance, to fall in love with someone she had once hated. The irony wasn't lost on her. 6 months later, Sarah sat in a coffee shop across from her father. It had taken time, many difficult conversations, and more patience than she knew she possessed. But slowly, gradually, Robert Mitchell had begun to accept his daughter's relationship with Daniel Cross. They still weren't friends, Sarah doubted they ever would be, but they had reached a tentative peace, built on mutual respect and the acknowledgement that sometimes life takes unexpected turns. "So," her father said, stirring sugar into his coffee, "I hear you're doing well in strategic planning." "I am," Sarah smiled. "We just finished a major acquisition analysis that the board approved. It felt good to contribute at that level." "Your mother is very proud." Robert paused, then added quietly, "I'm proud too." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her father's hand. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. I also hear Daniel is speaking at the tech conference next month." Robert's tone was carefully neutral. "He is." Sarah watched her father's face. "He's been working on his speech for weeks. You know how he is about perfection." "I do, actually." Robert's lips twitched slightly. "He sent me an email last week." Sarah's eyes widened. "He did? You didn't tell me." It was brief, professional. Robert pulled out his phone, showing Sarah the message. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in doing some consulting work for a company he's connected with. They're going through digital transformation and need someone with experience managing traditional corporate structures. He thought I might be a good fit. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had known Daniel was looking into opportunities for her father, but she hadn't known he had actually reached out. "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." Robert set his phone down. "It's good money, interesting work, and it would get your mother off my back about sitting around the house all day." "You should do it, Dad." Sarah's voice was earnest. "You have so much to offer, and it would be nice to see you engaged with work again, happy again." "I'm considering it." Robert met his daughter's eyes. "I won't lie and say this is easy for me, Sarah. But I'm trying, for you, and because I'm starting to understand that holding on to bitterness isn't serving anyone. That's all I can ask." Sarah smiled through her tears. Her phone buzzed, Daniel checking in, as he did several times a day. "Dinner tonight? I'm making reservations at that Italian place you love." Sarah typed back, "Sounds perfect." "Love you." She had said it for the first time a month ago, in the middle of an ordinary moment. They had been walking through a park, arguing playfully about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, when Sarah had suddenly stopped and said, "I love you, you know, just in case I haven't mentioned it." Daniel had frozen, his expression unreadable. Then his face had broken into the most genuine, unguarded smile she had ever seen. "I love you too. God help me, but I love you too." Now they said it often, easily. 3 words that had seemed impossible 6 months ago were now as natural as breathing. That evening, Daniel picked Sarah up from her apartment. He wore dark jeans and a simple sweater, casual in a way he never was at work. She loved seeing him like this, relaxed and comfortable. Over dinner, he told her about his day, about the challenges of managing rapid company growth, about the difficult decision he had to make regarding a failing project. Sarah listened, offering insights, asking questions, being the sounding board she had become. "You're better at this than any of my senior advisors," Daniel said at one point. "You see angles they miss. That's because I learned from the best." Sarah smiled. "You taught me to look past the obvious, to consider long-term implications, to make decisions based on data rather than emotion. Not all decisions should be data-driven." Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. "Some should be purely emotional, illogical, irrational even." "Like what?" Sarah's heart began to race, sensing something significant in his tone. "Like this." Daniel stood, and before Sarah could process what was happening, he was kneeling beside their table. The restaurant went quiet, other diners turning to watch. "Sarah Mitchell." Daniel's voice was steady, but his eyes held a vulnerability that made Sarah's breath catch. "6 months ago, You walked into my office planning to destroy me. Instead, you taught me how to be human again. You showed me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. You challenged me, frustrated me, and somehow made me fall completely, irrevocably in love with you. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but stunning ring. I know we've only been together for 6 months. I know most people would say this is too fast, but I've spent my entire adult life making calculated decisions, weighing risks and benefits. This is the first purely emotional decision I've ever made, and I've never been more certain of anything. Will you marry me? Sarah stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Around them, the restaurant held its breath. Yes. Her voice came out as a whisper, then stronger. Yes. Of course, yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms as the restaurant erupted in applause. He kissed her deeply, not caring that dozens of strangers were watching, not caring about anything except the woman in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Daniel whispered against her hair, "I hope your father doesn't kill me. I probably should have asked his permission first." Sarah laughed, the sound bright with joy. "He'll survive. And honestly, I think he's starting to like you, or at least hate you less. I'll take it." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I love you, Sarah Mitchell. Soon to be Sarah Cross, if you'll have my name." "I will. Though professionally, I might keep Mitchell." Sarah smiled. "Don't want anyone accusing me of riding my husband's coattails to success." "Fair enough. As long as you wear this ring and come home to me every night, you can call yourself whatever you want." They stayed at the restaurant for another hour, celebrating with champagne and dessert, making plans and dreaming about their future. It was perfect, almost impossibly so. When they finally left, walking hand in hand down the Seattle streets under a clear night sky, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. The anger, the deception, the gradual revelation of truth, and finally, this overwhelming love. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Daniel looked down at her, puzzled. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are, for being demanding and impossible and brilliant, for pushing me to be better, for loving me even when I came to you with the worst intentions." Sarah stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You gave me purpose, Daniel, and love, and a future I never imagined wanting." Daniel pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You gave me those things too. I was just existing before you, Sarah, going through motions, achieving goals that felt hollow. You made me remember what it feels like to actually live." They kissed under the street lights, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, whose love had grown from the ashes of anger and misunderstanding into something beautiful and real. Sarah thought about calling her father to share the news, but decided it could wait until morning. Tonight was just for them, for celebrating this new chapter. As they walked back to Daniel's apartment, Sarah glanced at the ring on her finger, catching the light. She had come to quantum dynamics, seeking revenge, and found redemption instead. She had tried to destroy Daniel Cross, and ended up building a life with him. Sometimes, she thought, the best stories are the ones we never planned to write. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.